Paul, congratulations first of all. Plan International are 80 years old. We're here today to talk about your birthday and to give a summary to our listeners of the great work that you do here in Plan. But before we talk about kind of the history of Plan and the work that you do today, could you tell me a bit about your background working in the development sector, please, before you became the CEO of Plan Ireland?
Okay, thanks. It's great to be here. I've over 30 years' experience in the sector, most of those working with Concern Worldwide. Started overseas started in Sudan with Concern, went from there to Liberia, to Bangladesh, to a number of other different countries. And then after quite a while overseas with Concern, I ended up in the head office in Concern initially as a regional director and then as the head of their international programs. So I was head of international programs for 11 and a half years, based out of Dublin, responsible for all of the development humanitarian programs that Concern was running in, at that time, almost 30 countries. Just more recently, I've moved to Plan International as the chief executive. I suppose I had seen Plan at work in the field in different places and different countries. I was quite impressed with their work. So when the opportunity arose to use my skills, use my experience in another organisation to bring about different change, I really kind of decided I'd go for that. When I looked at the history of Plan, it was born 80 years ago. It came from an interesting place. It came from Spain, so it was during the Spanish Civil War that a man in a town called Santander realised that he was going to be killed when the forces he was fighting came into the town. So he put a handwritten sign on his son and pushed his son across the front line. And the sign said, "This is Jose, I am his father, please look after him." And it was a journalist that picked up that boy and read the sign and decided then to see could they raise money, 1 shilling per day from people to be able to support that child. But he wasn't just happy to try and provide food for the child. He wanted the child to know that somebody in another country cared for him. And so was born this whole idea of sponsorship, of a family maybe in a developed country supporting a child coming out of a war situation. And from that, initially they had 300 children that were sponsored, and now 80 years later, on an annual basis, Plan is assisting over 50 million people through sponsorship. So it has grown hugely. It operates in over 50 countries worldwide. It raises money in another 21 countries, of which Ireland is one. We raise money, we raise the resources, and we provide those resources into different developing countries for projects and programs supporting communities in different places.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what marks Plan Ireland as being a different organisation than the likes of Concern and Oxfam, but you've already answered it. You work with 4 children.
We work, I suppose, Plan Ireland focuses mainly on children, but even more so now we're beginning to focus more on girls. And we see that girls tend to be deprived of so many things in developing countries. So sometimes girls, they're not fed as much food as maybe boys, because boys are considered almost like the pension plan for parents, whereas girls are seen as maybe they go away from the family when they become of age to get married. So we often see that boys are more favoured, girls are in many ways left behind. They're not given the same rights, the same access to food, same access to education, the same opportunities maybe that boys are given, so particularly in further education. And then when girls reach a certain age, in many places they are just married off because they're seen as a draw on the resources of a family, a poor family in that community. So it's better that they're married off to somebody else and they become somebody else's problem to feed. So, we think that girls should have the exact same rights as boys in terms of the amount of food that they're given, in terms of their access to education, and in terms of being able to make choices about when they should get married themselves and maybe who they get married to. So while respecting local tradition and custom, we think that there's certain things that really need to change if you're wanting to kind of make sure that girls have the same opportunities. And in many cases, when we see that you provide the same things to girls, you actually see so much positivity coming out of that. So if you can keep a girl for 4 years longer in school, her productive capacity, her economic capacity increases. The number of children that she have will actually drop. So you're actually seeing that she's better able to take care of her family, her children, herself. So you're getting a lot of positive benefits out of that when you actually focus on girls.
Yeah, I've been covering the development sector for a few years now, based in Ireland now, and I know that child marriage is a huge issue in most developing countries. Do you want to say anything about the biggest projects you're working on at the moment and the importance of these?
Well, I think the big focus, I think, is on the crisis in Africa, and mainly in East Africa. So in places like Sudan, Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia. We're seeing a lot of displacement as a result of war in places like Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia. And again, we see the issues that girls and women and probably children are more affected by these crises than anybody else. Even at times of emergency, if you get an earthquake or floods, the women and girls and children their chances of being killed are something like 14 times higher than for a man or for a young man. So the importance again of trying to make sure that women and children are looked after in these conflicts. They become very vulnerable to, again, being preyed on by men, by being used as a commodity in terms of physical abuse, sexual abuse. So again, the importance of trying to look after that group who are extremely vulnerable when they're displaced from their home, when they may be displaced from their family or separated from their family. So Plan Ireland is focusing a lot at the moment on lost girls, and where we see that over 16.5 million girls in the world are displaced. And many of these, really their kind of future becomes in doubt because of that. And they may be forced into situations which they would rather not choose maybe for themselves, because either their guardian or their family see it fit that they should be married early. So we're very much around prevention of early marriage. We recognise that the age of a child is somebody under 18. We have worked very hard to try and ensure that countries change their law, maybe where in practice people have been allowed, or girls have been allowed to get married at younger than 18. We try and advocate that that law be changed. And we've had recent success in Malawi, where through our efforts and the efforts of other organisations, we have changed the legal age for girls to get married from 16 to 18. And that will have, over a number of years, a huge impact, we believe, on families, on girls themselves, in terms of their education, in terms of their rights, and in terms of maybe the numbers of children that they are able to have and support to be healthy grown-ups themselves.
Yeah, and in South Sudan and Yemen and the countries in food crisis at the moment, are you also like supplying food or meals or?
We're supplying, or we're assisting with the World Food Programme in Sudan in a number of areas in the provision of food. We would also focus on things like education and that as well, because that tends to be very disrupted in some of those crises. So while food and therapeutic food is the immediate response required, we also look to the longer term and see how we can support families maybe to get back on their feet, to build up some assets and things in their houses so that they can actually be able to return to the lifestyle that they had before the crisis. We're doing that in Kenya, we're doing that in Ethiopia, we're doing that in South Sudan.
Yeah, I've read that a lot of girls in developing countries have to leave school for a few days every month because their menstrual cycle, they haven't got tampons. I do that kind of work as well. I know there's at least one organisation who focus specifically on that, but do you do that as well?
We also look to do that in places where it's appropriate and that too. We recognise that school, we're very much trying to make sure that girls can have access to school all year round, all days of the week. But we also try and make sure that school is a safe place for girls, so that that they're not picked on by teachers or by boys, and that we're working with teachers, the school committees, the parent committees, to make sure, that this school is a safe place for girls to go to, that it doesn't become a dangerous environment for them. Apart from other very practical issues like tampons and ensuring that things like that are made available, and that for girls as well. So all of that is part of a package that we would work on to try and ensure safe access to girls to school.
Yeah, could you tell me how long Plan are in Ireland? You have an office in Ireland, and could you tell me how easy or hard you find it to get the message of your work across to the Irish public via the media in Ireland?
Plan set up in Ireland over 14 years ago, and while it's a brand or a name that's recognised more globally around the world, here in Ireland it's probably not known that well, because it's a huge challenge for an organisation to start up and to try and get its name out there in terms of the work that it does. I suppose in that way, Plan has tried to focus on a number of campaigns. So we've had a campaign around Because I'm a Girl. And in some ways it's easier to explain to people the work of a campaign like Because I'm a Girl or Lost Girls, much easier than to start off and say like, oh, Plan International Ireland is doing this work or that work. So I think people get the campaign maybe more so than they get the brand of the organisation itself. But to answer your question, it's quite challenging to get space. It's quite challenging to get the opportunities, mainly because the name is not that well known. But once people get the opportunity to talk to us and realise the scale of the organisation, the impact it's delivering on the ground, then people are quite surprised by the level of the organisation itself on a global scale. So, it is, probably, as I've said, coming from Concern, Plan is over 4 times the size of Concern, but very few people in Ireland would recognise that because it's maybe not that well known here. So any sort of things that we can look to increase our profile, we can do within budget, because if we had a very big budget that we were willing to spend on communications, of course we could get our name out there. But we're actually trying to ensure that the majority of the resources that we raise actually are spent in the countries where the money was given for. So we're trying to keep a very slim operation, and yet recognise that by doing that, it might mean that our name is not as highly recognised as some of the other names in the market or in Ireland in itself.
Yeah, you mentioned Concern. Concern, I believe, Concern are an Irish NGO, but they're the biggest Irish NGO that are based in Ireland, that are Irish, but you're saying Plan are 4 times bigger, and other organisations, I presume Oxfam on an international level, are bigger as well.
Yeah, Oxfam and Plan International would be roughly around the same level in terms of the number of countries that they operate in terms of the scale of the financial resources that they have, in terms of the scale of the human resources. Plan International have over 10,000 staff working with them across the world. We have 50 countries where we're actually implementing programs. So that's a huge operation that requires a lot of resources to be able to run and to be able to deliver. But when you look at the numbers of people impacted by that organisation, it's over 50 million people annually are impacted, which is over 10 times the population of Ireland, and probably the total population of Britain in total is impacted on an annual basis by Plan International.
Yeah, it's amazing. You do great work. I believe you have ambassadors in the countries you're based in, don't you?
We have ambassadors here in Ireland that have had the opportunity to see our work on the ground and then become, in a sense, ambassadors for us. So people like Maria Walsh, who has visited Plan programs and then is able to come back and talk about what she has seen in terms of the work on the ground. And they become, in a sense, part of our communications and part of our legitimacy, is that those people have seen our work, understand what we do, and are able to talk to it, maybe to people or in opportunities where they may have in interviews or opportunities with their friends and that as well.
You have one ambassador at the moment, do you? Blondie Coffee. Is she still an ambassador?
She is, yes.
I remember reading an article by hers in the Evening Herald about a year and a half ago. It was very good about Plan visiting. I forget what country it was in now. But
I can't remember which country she visited. It was probably before my time. But that tends to be, I think the vast majority of Irish people don't have the opportunity to visit developing countries. When people get that opportunity to see the work of an organisation like Plan International on the ground, first of all, they become shocked by the level of poverty maybe that they will see on the ground. They become shocked by some of the things they may see in terms of people with disabilities and maybe how they're treated. But then they also see the positive impact of the work that an organisation like Plan is doing within communities, and the relationship that Plan has with local government, with local agencies, and the reputation that it has on the ground about delivering very sustainable development and very good assistance, and how it helps schools, how it helps teachers, how it helps students to be able to stay in school and essentially deliver a better life for themselves as they continue to grow and develop. So they get that opportunity, and when they're able to see it, it just creates a very deep impression on their lives and that as well. And so when they come back, they have the opportunity to talk about it.
Are Plan Ireland a member of Coalition 2030, the SDGs?
Yes, the SDGs would form a key part of what we would work to globally. Just like we look at the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and we look on the Convention of the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, which is known by the acronym CEDAW. So we have a number of kind of key international conventions and the likes of the Sustainable Development Goals that we try and focus on specific things within those. We focus very much around education and trying to ensure access to quality education for boys and girls. That education, they will have an opportunity to progress through and go to secondary school and ideally onto third level education should they want to. So we try and focus on, many countries have those goals as part of their country development plans. And what we're doing is going in and helping the country to assist those goals and deliver them with and for the people of the country.
Okay, Paul, that's great. Paul, how can our listeners best support you? So, I know financial donations are important to all development NGOs, but I presume there are other ways to stay involved or help the work of Plan also?
Well, of course, the financial support is really kind of appreciated. And if people can afford to support us on a monthly basis, either through sponsoring a child directly or through supporting our Girls Fund, a fund which we use to support girls in different developing countries. That support is hugely appreciated. But people can support us in other ways. They can support us through supporting our campaign, and particularly our campaign around lost girls at the moment. People can look at our website at www.plan.ie, and you'll see the campaign there where we're asking people to sign up to support that campaign to try and bring about change in ensuring that a lot of the girls who have been displaced at the moment, that they are looked after, and we try and prevent those crises from happening. And when they do happen, we try and make sure that girls are protected in those crises. People can support us in other ways by attending events that we may run on time to time. And so there's a whole host of ways that people can support us. Some financially, sometimes with their name, with their support for a campaign, and sometimes in other ways, and actually physically attending an event that we may be running in that as well.
Yeah, and you have a newsletter as well. People can sign up for it, don't you?
We have, yeah. It's again that all that information is available on our website www.plan.ie.
Well, it's great talking to you. I'll be talking to you again. Thanks very much.